Hi, my name is Fred, and today I'm going to give my testimony, give you a little background of my life and my relationship with Christ. I was born in Lebanon, Missouri, May of 1938. I was a small, skinny little baby, about 5 pounds and 3 ounces, born premature, and my brother Frank was the one that saved my life when I was about 18 to 20 months old. We didn't have milk, and he went out and sold pop bottles, iron, and the rest of it. It saved my life because I had suffered malnutrition. Now, I come from a large family. I'm the least of 9 that was born from my mom. The first one passed away when he was about 2 years of age. His name was Melvin. I have a loving siblings. There were 4 boys and 4 girls that were still living at that time. And it was a rough time for us because our dad deserted us. And he left my mom to raise us by herself. And as the boys got older, they each tried to help as best they could. But we suffered quite a bit because we were poor. But to me, just having my mom, who was a very devout Christian, taking care of you the best that she could. You never complained about not having enough food or not having the right clothes to wear. Not like today, where everything you get it for practically nothing. So I had to do odd jobs, and I was small as a kid. But I've had my experiences with death, threatening death. At the age of 4, my Aunt Elizabeth saved me from being stricken by a copperhead snake that was curled and ready to strike me while I was playing in the ditch. So throughout my life, as you'll learn as I will go along, as I have life-threatening in situations that come up, but it seems like God's hand has always been there for me. And I had a mother that prayed sometimes at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, especially during World War II, because all my brothers and even my dad was in World War II. My oldest brother was stationed in the Philippines, and my brother Torrance was stationed in Berlin, and my brother Frank, who really looked out for me more than anybody, he was on the battleship headed to invade Japan before the atomic bomb was released from Japan. So growing up was not easy, but I was a happy kid. We were poor, but I was just happy. And so kids at school anyway, would make fun of me all the time because I didn't have a father. But, I was happy. And they were always trying to give me shoes, always trying to give me stuff, invite me to parties and stuff like that. And I didn't like that because I didn't know what poor meant. Because I was a happy kid. I had a wonderful mom who looked out for me. Unfortunately, she had to work all the time, so she didn't have time to say, I love you and miss you and spend time with you. She was just wore out by the time she got home. And of course, we all had our duties to do, and if we didn't, we got to switch. It was a hickory switch. It wasn't just a slap on the head. You did something wrong. And there was a time that I said the wrong bad words in front of my mom and got my mouth washed out with soap. Tried that when I was a kid. But I was a rotten kid on the other hand too, But I probably deserved all the lickings I got. But I spent a lot of time in the woods. At age 8, I had my own rifle. I bought it with my own money. I worked. I sold pop bottles. I chased foul balls at the ball games, and there was a nickel for everyone I'd retrieve for them. Then I even set pins in a bowling alley at 8 years of age until they found out I was a kid and didn't belong there. But anyway, I did everything I could. But I didn't want to ask my mom for money. And the area that I lived in was in those days there was a division. There was a black town and a white town, and neither went that much back and forth. But black people were allowed to come over to our side of the town and go to the movies. And I'd be sitting in the movies and I'd see black people come in, and they'd always go up in the balcony. That's where they had to sit. So when they left, I went up there, and I'll be darned, they had the best seat in the house. And I thought, well, that's good for them. But I was never raised to be prejudiced. None of the members of my family ever used the N-word. And I didn't learn the N-word until I was moved to California when I was about 12 years of age. And then I was transplanted like a plant out there. Didn't go too well at first. I saw all these different nationalities, and I didn't even know they existed. Chinese and Japanese and you name it. And it's the first time that I ever played basketball with black kids. Right, basketball is basketball to me. But they were quick to tell me that I didn't know how to play basketball. Well, I proved them wrong many times. And I wound up being the only white kid on the black basketball team that traveled to just black high schools, predominantly anyway. It was quite an experience. I didn't make the starting five, but I was number 6, and they'd usher me in and out and so forth. But I was good in basketball. I was very good in athletics. And so was my brothers. But anyway, I won't linger any more on that. We moved to California, and it was not easy, and I went to Mount Vernon Junior High School in Los Angeles. And then as we got older, I was about 14 years of age, something like that. Around that age, I heard about a minister named Oral Roberts, and he had a big tent revival. So I went down there to see what was going on. It was supposed to be healing people. And so I couldn't get in the front because it was so, entrance of it was so packed with people. So I went around the back where the stage was, and I sort of slipped underneath the tent so I could peek to see. I wanted to see if people were actually being healed. And it was exciting. It was something I'd never seen before. So I ran home and I told my mom, and she got excited. So I went back and it was gone. They pulled up the tent and they'd moved on somewhere else. But then I heard about this guy named Jaggers. Oil Jaggers was his name. And he was also a faith healer. And he started a church that was called the World Fellowship Church. It was a huge church. It was probably one of the first mega churches, and he claimed he had 5,000 to 10,000 people there. All I know is that you had to get there early, or you didn't have a seat. You had to stand on the outside because that's how packed it was. And so I wound up going to high school there, and I had a sponsor, and his name was Sam, and him and his wife sponsored me all the way through high school. And I really enjoyed it, and I gave my life to Christ when I was about 16 years of age. And it was the most joyous thing that I had ever experienced. I remember I would walk home from church. I didn't have any money to give. I had tokens from the bus that I used to travel back and forth on. And I would put that in the offering plate, and then I'd walk home, and I was rejoicing. I was singing. I was happy all the way from there, all the way till I got home. And I really loved Christ, and I still do. And things got really hard for my mom, so I had to leave home at age 16 the first time. And I got a room, and I put the gas on for heating. It was on it was used for cooking, but it was so cold. I left it on for heating. The pilot light went out. and I almost died. It was my neighbor that came, he smelled the gas, came in, and they rescued me. So that's another time that I felt I was saved by the good Lord. And after that, I went back home, and I stayed home until I was 17. And about a couple of months after I was 17, my sister moved in with us because my mom had adopted my niece, Donna Francis, who lived with us since she was a baby. So then it was just too much, and then another of her grandchild wanted to move in, and so it was really, really, really tough. So I got a job selling clothes or at Bond Company, and then I was working for Woolworths, selling stuff, trying to get money, to earn money, and then I was very active at church. I was part of the youth organization there, and then that's how I met my ex-wife. And she was about a year older than me, but that didn't make any difference to me. And then I was walking her home from school all the time, and then we got to know each other pretty well. And she got a job, and then she offered to let me stay with her in her apartment. That was a big mistake. But I had no place to go, and I didn't want to go back home and be a burden of my mom. So one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, we broke up. And then, because my mom came over and she was having a fit about the whole thing. So she wanted me to come back home, which I did. But then, about 3 or 4 months later, all of a sudden I get a call from the church. All the deacons and everybody that was over there, elders. I didn't say a word. I couldn't explain anything. I had anything to say. They did all the talking. That if I didn't marry her, that I'd be cast in the lake of fire, and I'd never be a minister and all of it. Then they approached my mom without me even knowing it. My ex never even came to me at all. She went straight to the church. So it created a situation there that, I was forced and willingly, and actually, I decided, okay, I'll do the right thing. And then she agreed to do the right thing. So we tried to make a go of our marriage. But 8 years later, I knew it wouldn't. I knew from the very beginning it wasn't going to last. But we did the best we could. And the next thing you know, I had a second child coming, and that was Velma. So when I look back, it's worth all the pain that I went through for the two of the most beautiful children that I loved deeply. And when the divorce did occur in Hawaii, it was very painful for me. It was very painful for the kids. But I also was probably the first father in the state of Hawaii that took her to court, family court, and challenged her that they didn't necessarily be better off with her than me. So I had to prove my financial statements a whole bit. And by that time, my current wife and I were married, and she worked and I worked. We both fought them in court, and we won. But I found out later that the ex, or I shouldn't say, I'd say the stepfather, was not as good as I thought he was to the kids. But later on, I found out the true stories. But anyway, that started that. Then at the age of 19, I was standing in line because there was a minister from Germany. His name was Popejoy. Forgot his first name. I think it may have been George. I don't remember. And people would go through, and he had the ability to prophesy. And he put his hands on my head, and he said that God had called me to be a minister. And he said, "You're going to have another son." Well, my ex-wife was right along the side of me on the right-hand side. She's carrying Bellman. I think I was carrying Michael. And I was astonished that I was going to have another son. But then he looked at my ex-wife, and he stopped talking. He said something about money that to this day I still don't understand. And then he just told me to move on. Well, after the divorce, then that's where our youngest son, that's the next son that I had. His name was Jason. So he's my youngest son. So I do now have 2 sons and 1 daughter. When I've told them that, I don't know how much of that they believe now. But anyway, that's true. That's what happened. I was very involved with the church, and I was good. And I was even asked to speak at the Bible college that they had, because they gave me a license and they ordained me. The elders did at the church, because I was pretty knowledgeable for what was teaching in the Bible. And so from that point on, I did the best I could. I was leading the congregation in song and this kind of stuff, and taking up offerings and closing and setting up the stage. And we formed a gospel trio, and we sang on live television. And eventually, I left the church, and the main reason I left because they had no programs for the poor. There was nothing, not even for the homeless, not for the hungry, no food banks. And it just bothered me a lot. And all they did was take in money and then buy property. And after they bought Dale Evans and Roy Rogers Ranch, I just started, and they kept all the money in the family. And all of a sudden, I just realized, I had had enough. And I thought, well, let's just go out on our own and see what happens. So we traveled from California to San Diego to Phoenix, and then New Mexico, and we wound up in Dallas, Texas. When we went through Austin, Texas is where we had our biggest audience, and they were actually asking us for autographs. That's how good we were, and everybody kept telling us we should go to the Grand Ole Opry. But we broke up in Dallas, Texas. So from Dallas, Texas, I went on up to see my brother in St. Louis, and it turns out that his wife was kind of bigoted. So it didn't work out too well there. So we moved on, and I got a job in St. Louis to get money to travel. And I made contact with a former professor of the Bible college, who was starting his own church in Chicago, and he wanted me to come up and help him. And I thought, well, that's great. So we moved on up to Chicago. And it was not a good experience there. And it was very disgusting, because he thought I was proselyting. I was going to open up another church and take all of his congregation and so on. And I just had enough. And I had all this time that we were traveling, I saw all kinds of different denominations that we tried to sing in. And the way they treated us, some of them was very rude. If you don't believe the way that they believe, you're not saved, a whole bit. And it was kind of disgusting. But anyway, it was a bad experience. And then from there, I just decided that's it. And I didn't want to go to another church and get involved again. And I was very fortunate that at that time that I had put in an application to work for United Airlines at Midway Airport. And I wasn't truthful about my application, because I had to exaggerate the truth about where I'd been the last 3 or 4 months. And I was, so they sent me a telegram, so I went in and I just stood before the guy at Human Resources, and I said, look, I wasn't truthful. I was here, I did this, I did that. We sang, we were a gospel trio, and it didn't work out a whole bit. I turned around and walked away, And he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I just came in to tell you the truth because I wanted you to know the truth." And he said, "Well, when can you start?" Well, then I got that job at United Airlines. It was a good paying job. So anyway, I got involved with the wrong group there because they were all young, just like I was. They were 22, 23, 24 years old. We were just kids, really, but we were all working the night shift. And I think at this point, I'd like to just sort of close this out because after that, it just went downhill. I had never been in a bar. I didn't know what smoking was. I didn't know how to drink. And then when they tried to force me to drink a beer, I had to hold my nose to drink a beer. Can you believe that? And I didn't know how to smoke, and they were trying to teach me how to smoke. And so the whole situation in Chicago, it lasted for probably over 5 years or better. And then when I found out that my kids, when they went to grammar school, we had a hard time finding a place to live because people were very bigoted and very racial because we were mixed marriages were not accepted in the 50s. And if you think it's bad now, try interracial marriage in the 50s, my friend, and have the people stare and gawk at your kids and look at you like you're, unbelievable. But anyway, they called them half-breeds. And that was it. So I quit my job at United Airlines, told my ex, we're moving to Hawaii because I don't want my children to be raised in a racial area like this. It's just terrible. And I don't want them to be called half-breeds ever again. So I took my last trip passes from United Airlines, and that's how we got to Hawaii. And I wanted my children to be able to be raised in Hawaii and not suffer prejudice at all. And I think they still live there to this day. My oldest one just moved back, and they're very happy living in Hawaii because they don't have that stigma. They don't have that ugliness, that racism, this crap that's going on that's just very destructive. But anyway, I'm going to close off here because I'm a little bit long-winded. But then I'll get into my other situations and try to explain to you more what happened. And so this will be phase 1, and then I'll do phase 2 tomorrow. Thank you.